We ready? All right. I call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. I'd like to start with Director Dickman. Would you please read our board priorities?
Of course. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students. Provide leadership and direction to improve the overall learning environment in our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, security, and happiness of students and staff. Direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impacts of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Thank you. And Director Snyder, would you read our mission and vision statements, please?
Our mission is to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community. And our vision reads, education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and our community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. Mr. Scott, student board reports.
We'll start with Luke.
Central's National Honor Society is putting on a gene drive to give genes to homeless kids. Our Scholastic Bowl has been in action over the last month or so. We won the, it's a regional competition put on by Mediacom called the Thinkers Throwdown. And then they also, I'm not involved in this one, but they placed second on Saturday in the Regional History Bowl tournament, and they qualified for nationals.
Central also just had dinner theater for show choir, and then our first competition is this upcoming Saturday in Muscatine, and then our spree dance is also coming up Saturday the 24th.
At West, we just had auditions for our spring play today, and there were a lot of kids there, so that went well.
And then our show choir also recently had their dinner theater, and they suppose that they made that's their estimate was over 7,000, which is great for keeping the cost of those extracurricular programs low. And then one of our speech and debaters, Olivia, just recently qualified for the Tournament of Champions, which is one of the highest national honored ranked speech and debate tournaments.
Okay, at North we have we have two soccer teams that are playing in an indoor league. One is strictly freshman and sophomore, and I believe they are placed third in their league. And then in the same league we have a team with West where we had enough varsity players to combine and make a team, and we are currently placed at first. We also have tryouts for auditions for the musical, I believe, just happened, and we just learned that we're going to have two orchestras at North next year.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the showcase. Mr. Scott.
Today we have the pleasure to have Wilson Elementary, and if I could have Miss Wilkins step up here and get us started.
Good evening. Tonight I just wanted to kind of show you what Wilson has been doing very diligently, working very hard. We're in our second year of implementation of reading mastery across K through 5. I have to say just a really quick thanks to my staff that came here to support me with this. And I'm going to go through this, show you a couple of videos, kind of describe what it looks like at Wilson right now in reading. And then at the end, share some data. We all love the data. And then we have a teacher that's going to kind of talk about some of the highlights and some of the things that she's noticed with the program. So, are you helping me? Oh, yeah, it's right here. Okay. So reading mastery, I know, I hate this, but okay. Reading mastery is, it's comprehensive. It incorporates reading, language, oral language, literature, spelling, core lesson connections. It has the comprehension, phonemic awareness for younger kids, and it's lots of research. It's research-based. It's not based on research. and it also meets the rigorous state standards. 3 components of reading mastery. They have the reading strand, and the reading strand has all 5 essential reading components of reading: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, along with spelling and decoding. And then it also has the language arts strand teaches oral skills necessary to understand spoken, written, and reading in the classroom. And then the literature strand it supports reading in a variety of literacy forms. Direct instruction. Direct instruction helps students use skills and processes. It's a high rate of succession because whatever is presented is taught clearly and directly. Whatever is taught is actively practiced multiple times. I'm going to show you a little clip here. Hopefully.
The next sentence, Dakota. Get ready.
She said, "Mom, keep on white."
Nice reading, Dakota. Keep going.
They are so white. They shine like the moon.
Nice reading, Dakota. The next sentence, Dakota. Get ready.
She said, "Mom, keep on white."
Nice reading, Dakota. Keep going.
They
It's
are
looping.
so white.
I think it's going.
They shine like
Okay.
the moon.
Nice reading, Dakota.
Whatever is practiced is linked and applied to new learning. There's another example.
Landry, read the next sentence.
We wanted to make
Listen, that word is sure. Everybody, what word? Sure. Yes, sure. Go back to the beginning of your sentence and start again.
we wanted to make sure you were safe.
Just quick examples. The biggest component about reading mastery is it's continuously, there's informal tests and there's curriculum-based assessments. Everybody walks to reading. So we do have flexible grouping. We have students that are integrated. You may have kindergarten and first grade together, first and second grade, all the way up through fifth grade. We take daily data on each student. All of the teachers, and you have some examples of the data that the teachers are required to turn in. Our data team met today. Our reading data team meets after hours. And we go through, and the data that's turned into us, we walk through that, see how the students are progressing. Teachers have an opportunity to say, hey, this kid's flying, this kid is struggling. And so it really gives us an opportunity to move them within those groups. They have mastery tests. And the fluency tests, they actually start in kindergarten at lesson 108. Teachers are also required to give curriculum-based assessments. There's daily independent work. Students at Wilson are required to read every single night what they've already read, so it's already been practiced. And then parents sign off that they have read that to them. And then writing, we have additional writing. Obviously, we're teaching writing all the way through, but additional writing really hones in grades 4 and up. And then teachers also track the behavior every single day. So you have 2 examples of what the teachers are required to turn in your folders. The grade level focus in grades kindergarten and first grade, they're learning to read.
Get ready. Us. What word? Us. Yes, us. This word is us. What word? Us. Yes, us. Abigail, eyes up here tracking. Sound it out. Get ready. Us. What word? Us. Yes, us. See if you can remember. I will count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get ready. Us. Yes, us. Again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get ready. Us. Yes, us. Get ready.
Little
This is a kindergartner reading.
she has fun with the little cat. The little cat. She has fun with.
And in grades 2 and 3, we're reading to learn.
The shadows were cool, but the sun was very bright.
This is a first grade student.
Next to the van was a group of people. The chief asked why Bertha had come along. Maria was trying to explain. Chief, she said. Bertha, the shadows were cool, but the sun was.
That, I think, has probably been, and then in grades 4 and 5, the literature and the writing, the nicest part about that piece was that was a first grader reading in a level 2. So students have the opportunity to go either way, depending upon their level. And I think that's been the biggest eye-opener and the most refreshing piece, is that all students are walking to reading and they're receiving the instruction that they need at their instructional level. So then there's the data. At Wilson, we do MAP testing. And MAP testing we do in the 3 strands. We do in math, reading, and in language arts, and that's kindergarten through 5th grade. We began last winter, and then this is our first full year of MAP testing. So in MAP testing, our first graders, you can kind of see the growth just from fall to winter. The expected growth is 7 points, and these are averages. And then the growth that we saw just this year is 10.8, so they're exceeding our expectations. They're not quite all on grade level yet, but again, it's only second year of implementation. Our second graders jumped obviously, twice what their expected growth. And you can kind of see throughout what the expected growth is, and then what the averages that we saw just from fall to winter. This particular page, one of the things that we noticed is when we did placement tests when we first began. All children have placement tests before they're placed into a specific level. And so when we began this last year, we noticed a large number of our students, most of our students were well below grade level. So we decided that we would track that information too, to see how many students were on at their grade level and how many were below and how many were above. So we're seeing some amazing gains, and you can kind of see where we were at. Obviously, all of the kindergarten students, we have some few exceptions that we would push them up to first grade, but all of our kindergarten students begin at level K. And you can just kind of see the trend has been that more students are moving towards their grade level and are placed in on their grade level, and it's just been amazing to watch what has been happening. And I would say that's attributed to, obviously, my staff and everything that they have put into this. We've also, our literacy coach is a great support. And then this year, with the addition of all of the extra leadership that we have, is helping to push the kids where they need to be. And one little student clip. This was a new student.
Language arts and spelling, and you can read books, and it teaches you about independent self-work and how to figure things out by yourself, so when you get older you do that.
That's awesome. What books have you read that you enjoyed?
The Odyssey, and I also like the story about the donuts. That was really fun to read. It was funny too. It teaches you about
So it was really nice to hear what her experiences had been at other schools, and then she came to Wilson, and that was what she had seen and what the changes that she was excited about. And now I want to have, we have a 5th grade teacher that wants to talk about some of the things that I was just really stressing on the ahas, or the really cool things that we've seen with the program. This is Ms. Lotspeech.
Hello. I'm Peggy Lotspeech, and as Mrs. Wilkins said, I teach 5th grade, and I have the luxury and the pleasure of teaching level 5 in reading mastery. So I have students that love to read. A few of the things that I've noticed, I was not a big, not real gung-ho on this program when we first started, but it has really brought me over in what I'm seeing with my students. One of the things I love is that every student in my classroom is being taught at their instructional level. So I have fewer behavior problems because they're all focused, they're all doing the same thing. I'm allowed to work with those students at their instructional level because I don't have to worry about what this group over here is doing and what is that group over here doing. I'm able to focus on the students every day. I have fewer distractions for the students because, again, they're all doing the same thing. And that was actually a quote that I had from one of my students that said, I love that we're all doing the same thing and I don't have to worry about what somebody else is doing. So that's right out of the student's mouth, is that they like the fewer distractions and knowing that everyone in the room is working on the same thing that they're working on. As Mrs. Wilkins said, we do have daily data that we collect. It makes a wonderful data point for decision making. I can look at my daily data. I talked to a student today about his work that had changed slightly, and so I was able to sit and talk with him about why that was happening and what we might need to do to change that. I can also use that data to help me make decisions on whether a child should move up a level, whether he should move down, whether I need to talk to the reading team about some strategies that I might use for that child. And I also love that they are motivated. They love the stories. You heard in the clip that they've, at my level, at the level 5, they've read the Odyssey. That was one of the early stories that they read in the program, and they absolutely love it. They compare it independently to The Little Mermaid. They came up with that all on their own. They really get into studying Greece, and it's just wonderful to see the challenges. And that's the other big thing that I like, is that the program is rigorous. It's not me standing up just telling them what they need to do. They have daily work that they have to show. They have to write daily. They take homework home. We have discussions. So there's a lot of independent work that goes on, and they know that they have to do it to move up in the level. So they are challenged. They told me, I've had a number of students tell me that they love the stories, that they really grab you. I actually had a student that cried at the end of a story because he got so involved in the story and there was a character that died. So, and as a teacher, I think one of the things that is really great about this program is that the expectations are the same no matter what level you go to. So students can easily transition from one level to another. And it's seamless because they know that no matter what classroom they're going into, the teacher has the same expectation. And so it's just really great for students and teachers alike. And the wonderful thing is seeing the growth that you're seeing with our data. Thank you.
You don't do questions or anything like that. Is this good? Am I good? Oh, you do. Awesome. Okay. Fire away.
So do you have anything more to present?
I don't.
Okay, great.
I was told 10 minutes, so I'm
All right.
trying to stick to it.
You did very well. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Director Crumwoody.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Tonya, and I also recognize several of the Wilson staff in the audience, so thank you for joining us this evening as well. I'm really curious about reading mastery. I was surprised when you were presenting this because I didn't know that other schools were using reading mastery. How long have you been doing this?
And Dr. Tate's not, no, I'm kidding. This is our second year.
Your second year. Mm-hmm. So are other elementary schools, how many, maybe you don't know this, how many schools use reading mastery? Do you have any idea?
Well, we're the only other school that has a K-5.
K-5.
But obviously in special education, they're using it across the district. And then I know of one other school that is using it as more of an alternate core in just specific grade levels, okay. And that's at Monroe.
So you don't use the regular district curriculum in reading?
That's correct.
Okay, okay. A few years ago, that was an issue, and so I'm just curious how you're handling some of this at Wilson, because one of the concerns a few years ago was consistency with the reading program throughout the district because of mobility issues. Mm-hmm. And how are you dealing with that at Wilson with kids who maybe have gone through Wilson and all of a sudden move to another elementary school and are dealing with another whole new curriculum, or kiddos coming in to Wilson who have not been exposed to reading mastery? Is that an issue at all? I mean,
Well, I don't know how much of an issue the other schools are having to deal with. I do know when they have that child that comes in, they're going to be presented with a plethora of data on that kiddo as far as fluency. I mean, it still has all of the components of reading. So it's not that those kids are coming in completely oblivious to reading. But when we get students, the last clip that we had, that child came in, she was a 5th grade student. When we, as soon as kids come in, we do a quick placement test. So we'll do a placement test as soon as they come in. That's the group that they would go into, and then we watch and see how well they acclimate to that. So it's, I've not had it be an issue. I've actually had somebody personal that I know went from another school to to Treasures, and the parents were very frustrated because they didn't know what to expect. I mean, I certainly don't want to dismiss what Treasures offers. I just know why we chose to go down this path and where we're at.
okay.
So,
Well, it's good to see that, the data is showing that it's working at Wilson School. I was just, I was surprised because I thought we were pretty consistent across the district. The other, and again, I see several Wilson teachers in the audience. Are other teachers outside of classroom teachers, are they involved in reading mastery at all? Like, I see the music teacher and the art folks and, are they involved at all? Okay. Okay, so all teachers are reading teachers.
yes.
Great.
To a certain level. I mean, you have to be respectful of their craft. But Mrs. Stricker supports us when students haven't finished their homework or they need to take a portion of what they were supposed to complete, so she supports us that way. But I think in general, just going completely to an alternate core curriculum, everybody has to be on board. So, I mean, I think they're all supportive of the program, and they understand why we chose to go down the path that we are on.
Well, good. Congratulations. And
Thank
keep
you.
up the good work.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Director Dickman.
I'm curious if you have the data on what effect that this program has on the achievement gap. Is that something you've been collecting or have?
Well, we have the MAP data, and we can pull those students and look at that. That's really nice for us to be able to use the MAP just because it's right there at our fingertips and it goes K through 5. I mean, there's a lot of data that I can pull. I mean, there's enormous amounts of data. Have we specifically, I mean, I think we have various conversations about different kiddos and what they need and what's happening with them. So, I like to look at all of the kiddos and not just the gap kids.
Right.
And some of their strengths and weaknesses. So, I mean, when we see a kiddo that's not making some of the growth that is expected, we dig deeper just like we would with any kid. Some of our kids, they've gone through the charts on MAP, and that's an exciting conversation too. We have 2 kids that have accelerated this year and 1 that's looking at accelerating, and reading mastery is perfect for that because it allows us to see those things. So I can pull that data. I'd be happy to pull that data. And in there,
Curious.
yeah. And just, I mean, basically what we're looking for is at least a year's growth, if not more, especially those kids that are not cutting it. But we also like to look at those kids that are above grade level too, so,
And
or on
obvious-
grade level.
Obviously, you've shown a lot of data that they're making appropriate growth, more than appropriate growth. I'm just curious to see if it's reaching down to help the disadvantaged students. Not speaking as eloquently as I wish right now. And then one more quick question: do you have, for any of your 5th graders or alums, do you hear anecdotes about that they like to read for fun? Have they learn to read to a level where they now do it on their own for fun?
And I would say yes. We have had some parents that have responded, hey, thank you. But last year it was only 1 year that they had it. This year we have 5 students that are beyond the level 5. So they get to focus on just rich literature, just doing something a little bit different than the other kiddos are. My hope is that I have a whole class of kids that are beyond a level 5, 2 years. So, that's what we're looking at. But I think, and you'll hear, just like what Ms. Lott's speech said, they're passionate about what they're reading. They're excited. The vocabulary is so rich. It also infuses, the social studies, the nonfiction. And you may ask a kid, what's going on in reading? Oh, I don't like it right now. Well, what are you reading about? Well, it's this, or it's baseball, or it's something, so it still comes back to what do they prefer to read, and you're going to have that. But yeah, I think they're having fun.
Anybody else? Director Kluhl.
It's always interesting to hear principals talk about their kids. Your kiddos were Kathy Schulte's friends. It's just very interesting, endearing. But a couple of things. I was wondering about the flexible groupings.
Mm-hmm.
And did you indicate that those were actually different age groups within those two? So the cohorts aren't necessarily by age, they're by ability.
Correct.
I think that's very innovative, much like what we're doing at Lincoln in sending our kids, or JB, sending our kids through based on ability rather than age grouping, which is something that we have done forever, but really isn't that relevant to how kids are learning.
And just to comment on that, I have a 5th grader that he comes to mind, and he really anxiously wanted to be in that level 5. And he knows that, there's certain things that he's going to have to do to reach that level 5 before we would look at the data and say, okay, he's ready, let's push him. But he was so hungry to move. And I think that's kind of the piece for the kids, is that they get enough feedback that they know what they want, and they want to be on grade level. They want to be at that place. I remember, a dad sitting in my office and saying he wants to be there. What does he need to do? And I spelled it out for him. And, but within a month, he and I are jumping up and down outside the music room because he got to move up to the next level. So there is that drive, and I know that JB does that with their MAP testing. That helps adjust it too. So when they take that assessment, for us, it's a little bit different because we look at it every 2 weeks. So a child could move, after that short amount of time. So I think that makes us all rest a little easier, knowing that they're not pigeonholed.
Yeah. Well, it ties right into the board priorities that Director Dickman read earlier, too, in terms of happiness. When you show a child a ladder that he can climb to get to where he wants to be very clearly, I think that clear roadmap leads to happiness. I was curious, what the MAP expectation, what's that MAP expectation based on? Where does that number come from?
Oh, those are norms. It's a normed reference test, a norm test.
Okay. So those come standardized.
Right.
All right. And the only other thing, I am concerned about the standardization that Ken talked about a little bit. I'm fascinated with the ability of this program to do what it's doing. I think the board needs to have some discussion about equity across the district. It's a discussion that we haven't had for some time, but clearly when schools are pulling ahead, there's a reason for that, and we need to take a closer look at that. Not that all need to be the same, but the issue of mobility, of course, is always a concern. And the only other thing is the 5th grade reading the Odyssey. I'm just blown away by that, and kids enjoying it, but then comparing it to The Little Mermaid. I can only imagine, Poseidon, The Little Mermaid. Oh, the possibilities are endless there. So that's cool. And if they're enjoying the Odyssey at that age, they have got a long road ahead of a lot of fun reading. That's great. So thank you very much.
Director Snyder, you have anything?
No, I
Great. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Great
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you. We'll move into communications. Director Kluhl, would you please read our upcoming events?
Yes, on January 19th, we will hold a holiday, and the Achievement Service Center will be closed. On January 20th, the Legislative Advocacy Work Session will be held at 5:30 here at the Jim Hester Boardroom. January 26th is the regular meeting of the board at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom. February 2nd, Committee of the Whole meeting here in the Jim Hester Boardroom. February 9th is a regular meeting at 6 p.m. here in the Jim Hester Boardroom. February 16th is get on the bus trip to the Capitol in Des Moines, and we're about to get information on that out. So we're really hoping that a lot of you student school board members will be able to attend and serve as leaders on that trip. It's a fun trip. The weather is oftentimes exciting. And certainly meeting with our legislators in person, it's good for them, it's good for you. It's a win-win situation. And then on February 23rd, again, is the regular meeting at 6 p.m. here in the Jim Hester Boardroom.
Thank you. Excuse me. Next is open forum. We have no open forum requests this evening. But it is something, it's an opportunity for members of our community to come and express your thoughts about things going on in our district. We always welcome that, and we look forward to any of you coming forward during our open forum. Move to the consent agenda. May I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Director Crumwitty.
I move the consent agenda as presented by the administration.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Crumwitty.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. May I have a motion regarding approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director Kluhl.
I move that the following resolution be approved as recommended by the administration for the adoption of bills. The resolution is as follows. Resolved that all claims presented to the board, having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and they are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn in the treasury for the several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the period of December 4th, 2014 through December 17th, 2014, with the following voided check, and that being number 323229, payable to the Bettendorf YMCA in the amount of $166.50. That was the wrong vendor. And there was a special release by the President on December 18th, 2014 through January 7th of 2014.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Call for the vote. Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Crumwitty.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Is there a superintendent report, Mr. Scott?
Not tonight.
Okay. Move into other items requiring action. I have a motion regarding approval of Raptor system.
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board accept the district administration's recommendation of the purchase of Raptor Vsoft system under GSA contract number GS07F127BA for the amount not to exceed $65,000 for the initial implementation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Well, oh, did you, Director Crumwitty?
Yeah, I was curious. This past week, I received a packet from another company that expressed an interest in a system, and I was just curious as to Have we looked into other possibilities besides the Raptor system? So just, that's my concern.
Sure. There was an exploration of 3 separate systems, which all cover the sex offender registry. And the most recent communications, if it's the same vendor that I was familiar with that sent some information through Marcia Tangen, they don't include the sex offender registry. Check. So under the GSA, we're able to move forward with this group.
Director Snyder.
Just to verify, if I remember from our earlier discussion, this is covered through Pell funds?
It is through the SAVE and PEPAL.
Pebbles? Oh, through SAVE? Okay.
Any other discussion? I'd like to hand the chair off to Director Kluhl, Vice President, if you don't mind.
Sure. Is there any further discussion?
Yes.
I thought there might be.
Thank you. The is there a sense of urgency to approving this?
Only in that
Tonight.
we'd like to get the equipment into place this spring so that we've got some hands-on to make sure that we're ready for implementation before next fall.
But a couple of weeks of delay wouldn't affect it.
No, not
The
at all.
reason I ask is Director Crumwitty's question about that mailing that we got, and I didn't take the opportunity to call you or anybody else that was involved in it, but I thought it did have a sex offender registry check on it, and it was, at least the way that it was presented, it was a reasonable lower cost for implementation and a lower yearly cost. And so I guess I would move to postpone this motion approval until January 26th.
There's a motion to hold off approval until the 26th. Is there a second?
I will second that.
It has been moved and seconded, and I will turn the gavel back over to the president. And the chair with it.
All right, thank you. So there's a motion to postpone until the 26th. The vote on this particular motion, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Snyder.
You said there are no negative implications for delaying this just a couple weeks?
No, we do have a secretary's training scheduled for February 19th, I believe. So that would be in time for that training if the board proceeds.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other discussion on the move to postpone? Director Crumwitty.
Well, I appreciate that motion. I went through that packet, but I rushed through it, so I didn't read all
And
the
it may
details.
be different than what we received.
So, but
as well.
I think, I'm not sure why I received it. I received it, Ralph received it, and I think, Marcia, your name was on the same letter, so I'm not sure if it's the same packet, but I need to
Didn't receive a copy of the packet. I
Oh,
just
really?
received a phone call from the individual and forwarded them on to Rachel's department, so I don't have any description of what it was that they
Okay.
were proposing.
Well, I think it's something that we should look into.
Any additional discussion? We'll call for the vote on the motion to postpone this vote until January 26th. Director Johansson, yes.
Oops.
I don't know who seconded. Okay, Director Crumwitty.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Motion carries, and this will be on the January 26th meeting. Thank you. Excuse me. May I have a motion regarding approval of amended diversity plan?
Mr. President,
Director Dickman.
I move the administration's recommendation that the board approve the revised district diversity plan, which will be sent to the Iowa Department of Education as required by the Iowa Administrative Code.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? I wonder if there shouldn't be discussion. Director Kluhl?
Yeah, I wonder if administration might talk to the reason as to why the revision of the diversity plan.
Here comes Dawn. That's what I can tell you.
Part of the reason is because of the seat buildings, where we have buildings that every student in there receives free lunch. And our plan is saying that students who receive free lunch, that's part of what we use in determining if a student is Category A or Category B student. And so by changing this, instead of the seat buildings, changing it to the home economic survey, which then is looking at reduced fees or free fees instead of the lunch.
So for the general public, I just wanted to make it clear that there wasn't any substantive change in the diversity policy. It was just catching up with some changes that have been made in terms of funding to our schools.
Correct.
Director Crumwoody.
If I understand right, this has been reviewed by our attorneys, and now the next step, it will go on to the Department of Education. So our attorneys felt pretty comfortable with the modifications. Question to you, Mr. President?
I don't recall if you were at that meeting. Were you?
No.
Okay. I'll try to characterize then my interpretation of the discussion was that our lawyer believed that this was probably the best we could do. There are difficulties in parts of this, but the intent here is to approve this change so that we can abide by this diversity plan now. The submission to the Department of Education, there are time constraints and time requirements, excuse me, and we'll have to see what they say, but we're, as our lawyer interpreted the legal requirement for the diversity plan, she believed that we're about as compliant as we can be. Is that kind of fair? Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll call for the vote. Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Kluhl.
Yes.
Director Crumwoody.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval of Fillmore Elementary School site work BP3A, BP3B, and BP3C?
Okay.
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the lowest responsible and responsive bids of $229,150 for bid package 3A to Needham Excavating, bid package 3B to Tri-City Blacktop for $114,110, and bid package 3C to Triber Construction for $73,385.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Dickman.
In our packets, we have the Scheme A with a preschool edition, Scheme B1 and Scheme B2.
Yes, as a separate item related to Fillmore is consideration of making some changes to the current plans in order to provide space for pre-K. This is award of bid package 3 of 4 bid packages for the addition of the multipurpose room and classroom, 6 classroom addition that was approved last summer. So this one is an ordinary part of the progression of that project. The other item is that since the project began, there has been some discussion of should there be pre-K added to Fillmore, and that's set up as a separate motion.
Okay. So that motion is not currently on the table, or?
This is only award of bid for the project that you approved last summer.
Okay.
And does not include anything to do with pre-K.
Okay. I guess I'm confused why it's in the packet then. Is that just to show us for the future?
Well, there are 2 items there. There's a floor plan showing the alternates we considered and a recommendation for you to consider about making changes to the plans that have already been approved in order to provide a pre-K space. So this is the award of bid package 3 out of 4 total bid packages for the plans that were approved last summer. A separate item, we were asked to look at what would be the possibilities for adding a pre-K space, and that's a separate item for your consideration.
So if the board does want to add a space for pre-K, is that something that we should do now then?
That's something that the second item was for your discussion and consideration.
Okay.
Director Cromedy.
Yes, and I'm confused. So when I read this information, I understood what we were going to do, possibly if we wanted to move forward with the preschool piece of this, was to amend this original motion to include the preschool piece.
The construction work and the original design is currently underway, and it was set up by requirements of the schedule to bid in 4 bid packages. So site work has already begun, utility relocation has already begun, and these 2 bid packages, this one and the one that's at your next board meeting, is to complete all of the work that was originally approved last summer. Since that time, some of you and other staff have engaged in a question about should we add pre-K. So there's another item on your agenda here to consider adding pre-K, and if you choose to do that, we would amend the current construction contracts by way of change order to make revisions to the plans to add pre-K space at Fillmore.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'm still confused, searching for the other item on the agenda, because there is only one item on this agenda concerning Fillmore.
That's the way I read it also. Was it your intent to have a discussion item on the preschool edition on tonight's?
It was my intent for you to be able to entertain 2 motions, one to award bid on the work that is currently underway, and a separate motion to consider whether you wanted to amend the project to add the pre-K space.
So are you suggesting that the amendment would be part of this motion?
I believe you could do that way if you chose.
Yeah, because I don't see any other place to put it. So this motion, the way that it's currently set up, and I apologize, I don't want to get ahead of the board, but you've got the 3 bid packages here that are currently on the table for consideration. And the consideration of the preschool addition, Scheme B2, is one that could be discussed in the context of this motion.
Yes, it could. I expected that there would be 2 agenda items separate, And with Mary's absence and other things, I'm not quite certain how we got structured exactly this way.
Yep, and that could be, and I I apologize. Mary's had some real challenges here the last week or so. So let's move on with discussion then. Director Dickman, Director Crumwitty, are you more clear on where we are now?
Well, I think so. If I understand right, we can amend this original motion. Originally, I understood Mike to say no, it needs to be a separate agenda item, but it's not on the agenda. So it seems to me that we're going to have to amend this motion to include the preschool. And I definitely, and as I expressed last time, from being on the preschool, part of the preschool committee and being on the poverty committee, I have a real concern about the lack of preschool opportunities for children in the Fillmore area. So I strongly support an amended motion that would include the preschool project, so we can get on with this this project at Fillmore and get it completed, so we can get more 4-year-olds to have the opportunity to have that preschool experience at Fillmore School. So I would like to amend the motion, and I'm not exactly sure, do I need to reread the first piece, or just can I amend the motion saying I move to direct staff to amend the current Fillmore Elementary School project scope to provide a pre-K classroom at an estimated cost of $475,000.
Do you want to say preschool classroom or preschool addition?
Preschool addition.
Okay. I think that's sufficient. What'd you say, 475?
$475,000.
All right. I'll accept that as a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Second.
That's the letter that we received.
Excuse me, I'm going to try and keep track of this. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend? Director Snyder.
Mr. Maloney, if we vote to accept this amendment, do you have documentation or any information as far as how that would affect the 3 bid packages that we are voting on?
They would have no effect on these 3 bid packages. We would conclude the final design documents for the changes to the building to add the pre-K space, and then bid those out for change orders to existing contracts. So the motion, the way Director Crumley has stated it, would work just fine for us.
Okay, so I guess I'm not sure why, if it has no effect on these 3 bid packages, that it even needs to be discussed right now.
Director Crumwitty, would you answer that question?
I will try. I'm not sure if Mike is saying it's not going to impact these other projects. I'm concerned about making sure that we have, as a board, approved the additional preschool addition at Fillmore School. And I'm not sure how else we do this unless we amend it to this motion. And what I'm hearing Mike say is that would work. We could do both in one motion. So that's the best I can do, Director.
Okay. Can I
Thank you,
try
Director.
to help? Maybe. What we would be doing is awarding the bid for the existing contracts, and then you would be amending it. You would be telling us to go get bids to make the changes, to add the pre-K space, and it would be in the existing space and not an addition, to be clear. and we've estimated a budget, and we would just take your direction then and bring the award of bid back to you after we had priced those changes. So your motion sounds right to me.
Director Crumwoody.
And that's why, originally I said classroom because it's my understanding it wouldn't be an addition onto what we've already proved. It would be modifications within the structure that we've approved.
Director Snyder, do you have more?
No, and I understand that, and I support the preschool as well, but I'm just curious why we're trying to backdoor this in for a decision when it wasn't really on the agenda, and it really doesn't tie into what is on the agenda. I guess that's where my concern lies.
I understand. Director Dickman.
It's my understanding that we are not allowed to add an item to the agenda unless it has been published in advance. Is that a correct understanding?
It's correct that we cannot add an item to the agenda. That's correct.
So if we were to do this as a separate motion, then we would be breaking that.
We could not do that.
Correct.
And
So I
that's-
think that answers Director Snyder's question as to why we're amending this motion as opposed to making a new one. Does that?
Not really. I'm just wondering why it has to be done right now. That's my question. If it doesn't have any effect on this.
It doesn't have any effect on the work that was approved, but if you wish to have a pre-K classroom by August, then we would need that direction now in order to make those changes and get it into construction.
Right, and that I understand, but without the discussion and two board members missing, I just wonder if we're appearing as if we're sliding it in without the proper.
I do
Steps.
appreciate that concern. I do believe, I don't recall the board members who are absent now what their particular position was on this, but I recall when this was discussed at a prior meeting that there didn't seem to be opposition to the idea of adding preschool classrooms to the Fillmore plan. My original question is which scheme we are discussing, if we are discussing scheme B1 or scheme B2.
I'll have to see the document here. I'm sorry, one moment.
It's one classroom addition, whatever you want to call it, versus two for those of you who don't have the document in front of you.
It would be the one that's not an addition. I'm sorry, I don't have
Okay.
the plan here in front of me. There are three schemes shown on the presentation piece.
Okay.
Scheme A, thank you, Steve.
Okay. On scheme A, it has preschool addition scheme B1 and preschool addition scheme B2.
We considered B1 and B2s as options that would actually make an addition by the kindergarten wing.
Okay.
And then in discussions with all of the leadership team, we determined that we could actually make it inside the existing building without compromising the other goals of the project, and that Scheme A to remodel an existing room to become the pre-K in the existing building was the preferred alternative.
Okay. And so that would be one preschool classroom then at Fillmore.
That would be one preschool classroom at Fillmore.
Okay, then I would also like the board to consider the addition of scheme B1 and scheme B2. I share Director Crumwoody's feeling that we do not have enough preschool in Davenport. I can't speak to the Fillmore area specifically, but I take him at his word. And I think that having kids go to preschool where they are going to school is a community building, has a community building effect, and also is better for the children that they get familiar with where they will be going to school. Should I make that as a separate motion to discuss?
Well, I'm not quite clear I think you're trying to amend the amendment.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Well, I'm asking if I should do that.
So there are a couple of ways to do it. One would be if it's a friendly amendment that the originator, who is Director Crumwoody, and the seconder, which is Director Kluel, if they agree with it, it can be a friendly amendment to the amendment that they accept that preserves the existing amendment with the modification that you're talking about. Otherwise, what we would need to do, and I need to think through it a little bit, I think we have an amendment on the table, and I probably would actually accept a separate motion for an amendment to the amendment, and we would go through that in that kind of order. So first I would ask, what exactly, you're trying to clarify the...
I believe currently the amendment is for Scheme A only.
Yes, the amendment is for Scheme A only,
Right.
which would add pre-K to an existing space in the existing building.
And so I first then would like to propose a friendly amendment to Director Crumwoody and Director Kluel to their amendment to include Scheme B2 as well.
So it would be Scheme A and Scheme B2. Director Crumwoody.
If we deviate from Scheme A, and my amendment included the cost of rearranging within the already approved structure, would there be a cost difference?
Yes, sir, a substantial one. We think your amendment would be about a $475,000 increase in project costs, and my best guess of B2 is about $1 million.
Okay. That's my concern about the amended amendment, because it's my understanding from the information that we received back from the administration, from the principal at Fillmore, and from the central office, is that in discussions that they've had, they could accommodate with what we've already approved. They could accommodate a preschool within that existing structure. It would cost, however, $475,000. If we would go to Scheme B,
And we would add that as
it
well.
would add additional costs. And my position on this whole thing with preschool at Fillmore School is that I just want a preschool at Fillmore School to get started, so we have that preschool opportunity. And then Director DeFaw, I know she's not here, but Director DeFaw is the one that said last time she would like to look at kind of a plan to see where the district's headed with preschool. I think we could put that preschool within the existing structure And then I think we as a district, and I agree with Nikki, we as a district need to decide what are our future steps with preschool in this district, because we already know from information that we have received from the preschool committee and from the poverty committee, we have a whole lot of kiddos out there that aren't getting preschool. So we do need to develop a plan, but Fillmore gives us an opportunity right now to put a preschool in there within the existing structure that's already been approved. So that's my concern with your amendment.
Can I ask? What, I guess, is there a big cost difference between if we added B2 now or if we added it in 10 years? Are there any costs we would save by the building already being under construction?
Well, there'd be a certain amount of the general overhead costs that are currently already in place, general conditions costs. And then, of course, construction escalation occurs over time. But regardless of what project gets done in the future, it will cost more than if it were done today.
Okay, but it's not like there's currently a wall open and we're building it back up just to tear it down.
Oh, no,
Okay. Then I rescind my friendly amendment.
Sounds like a song.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, hey, that's why we're having this.
Mr. Maloney, could you clarify, excuse me, the location for the modification that would take place on the preschool remodel Scheme A? Where would the preschool room be based on the current motion, the current amended motion that's on the table?
On the plan in your packet, it would be at the very end of the corridor where it says it's labeled preschool, adjacent to across from the art room.
All right, great. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Is there additional discussion on where the motion on the table is the amendment, which includes the additional $475,000 to allow us to do the preschool remodel Scheme A and allow the preschool modifications. Is there an additional discussion on the amendment? Director Snyder.
Mr. Maloney, if we were to actually put this on the agenda and vote on this at our next meeting and have the discussions as we should as a board, because my fellow board members have clearly supported my opinion that we need more discussion on this rather than unnecessarily backdooring this in, because I'm not real sure that the majority of the board even has a full understanding of everything that's involved with this, because I certainly don't. Would there be any implications of waiting 2 weeks?
The Fillmore project is this year's Truman. It's definitely the most challenging schedule, and we always say it would be more difficult. It would be very much more difficult. It wouldn't make it impossible, and if we could continue to do some preliminary work on preparing for either decision that you might make. And my team behind me is cringing, and say it's not going to be a showstopper if you delay 2 weeks. They may kill me tomorrow.
And I won't be here in 2 weeks.
Director Snyder, did you have more? Nope. Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? I'd like to turn the chair over to Vice President.
Will there be any further discussion on this item?
Yes.
Director Johansson.
Thank you. I share Director Snyder's concern for the propriety, I guess, of the way that we're doing this. And in fact, when I first saw the motion, I thought, it's just a different way that we're doing it by approving 3 bid packages in one motion. But that, you don't have any problem with it, and Marcia, you don't have any problem with that. I also share the expressions of adding this into the Fillmore project. I think this is a reasonable thing to do. And we have chicken and egg problems right now because we don't know what you're going to present in February or March for the long-range plan, and we haven't had that discussion yet on our long-range thinking on preschool in the district. So I support the ideal, but I don't really support the amendment. And so because I'm concerned too about the just the way that it appears. I wish that our other board members could be here to discuss it. I'd like to have a clear understanding, and I think I understand. But let me ask you this. The 475 is not something that is in any of our long-range plan. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is not in a current budget. We would have to work, and we are currently working with the long-range plan because, as part of our later discussion, there are a number of things that we know have to be changed around, reconsidered, sequences changed, budgets changed, and so forth.
So this would, theoretically, it would mean that we'll have to take money from another project.
And we have some contingencies in as well, but
Right.
it would mean we would have to take it into consideration with the rest of resequencing because the current sequencing will not work with the resources available.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Turn the chair back over to the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any additional discussion on the amendment to add in the 475,000, and that this would this motion then would include the original motions with the 3 bid packages, and it would include an estimated amount of 475,000 for a preschool addition to the preschool remodel scheme A. Is there any additional discussion on the amendment? All right, call for the vote. Director Crumity.
Yes.
Director Kluel.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
No.
And my vote is no. The motion passes. So now the motion on the table is to approve the Fillmore Elementary School site work BP 3A, 3B, and 3C. And in addition, and I don't know how this will be worded exactly, you have wording that we can give to the secretary, but my understanding is that it would also include the estimated 475,000 that would allow the preschool addition scheme A. Correct? All right, so that's the motion on the table. Any additional discussion? All right, we'll call for the vote, and let me figure this out here. All right, I think I have it right. Director Snyder?
Yes.
Director Kluel?
Yes.
Director Crumwitty?
Yes.
Director Dickman?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. May I have a motion regarding approval of Wood Intermediate BP3A and BP3B?
Mr. President,
Director Kluel.
I move that the board approve the administration's recommendation for the lowest responsible responsive bids of $113,500 for BP3A to Hertzen Plumbing, it's spelled wrong, and heating, and BP3B to Tri-City Blacktop for $71,500.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, call for the vote. Director Cluel?
Yes.
Director Crumwoody?
Yes.
Director Dickman?
Yes.
Director Snyder?
Yes.
My vote is yes. Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion regarding approval to amend the current central auditorium and pool project?
Mr. President,
Director Crumwoody.
I move the administration's recommendation that the board approve amending the current Central High School auditorium and pool project to include adding renovations of existing auditorium, pool area, and PE locker rooms, the secure entry and ADA improvements, and replacement of the green roof for a total budget of $4,228,813, and direct staff to solicit bids and bring bid awards for board consideration in order to complete the work by August 2016.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Director Cluel.
Mike, administration also had a recommended amendment here. Could you talk about that? Am I correct?
A recommended amendment? No, sir, I don't think. We had several drafts of this.
Okay, I'm
but
looking at a
the
previous
motion
draft
just
now.
made was the administration's recommendation.
Okay.
Did you have more?
No.
Oh, any additional discussion? Director Snyder.
There's two items on here, the existing PE locker room and the roof, that according to your information here have no effect on the current project in regards to lumping it in to save any money, time,
No, what I
other than
meant
just
to
doing it.
What I meant to show in that matrix was that they didn't have any effect on any of the other individual projects. Now, each of these things was already currently budgeted, but the other three, the ADA secure entry, the renovation of the pool area, and the renovation of the auditorium, are all somehow connected to one another in the impacts that they have.
Correct, I understood that, but the PE locker room and the roof are in no way connected, where the Pro Start, the secure entry, the existing pool, and the existing auditorium aspects do.
Each of those, right, has a connection one to the other.
Okay.
Did you have more, Director Snyder?
Not right now.
Okay, additional discussion. Well, I'd like to turn the chair over again then, if I may.
Accepted. Is there any further discussion on this item?
Sure.
Mr. President.
So when I look at this, and it kind of feels like mission or scope creep. And I understand the reason for doing all this. But it does seem like, and even though all of this money has been budgeted, but it was in future years, right?
It was in the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. These were all projects that were currently scheduled in the long-range plan going back I don't know how many years, with the exception of the Pro Start Culinary Kitchen, which was out in 17-18, I believe. These others were expected to be executed in 14-15, 15-16.
So how does that affect our long-range plan? If you looked at the dollars, will that change where we're spending other dollars.
No, the plan that you were given in August, the spreadsheets for SAVE and for PEPL included these projects. They had already been expected to be executed during this year and next year. I might say that the exception is the roof. There's a category for roofing in PEPL, but it hadn't been identified particularly which projects. So it would come out of the roofing category.
Yeah, there was something in that roofing that you presented before that's kind of a generic category, the way I recall it.
Yes.
And it was like $500,000 a year or something. I don't remember the number.
At the time that we presented that last summer, we hadn't had a PEPL spreadsheet before, and we arbitrarily put some amounts in and said when we do this update in the spring that, we would put some real thought into, and we have been out examining all the roofs in the district and so forth so that we can change that from a category to actual projects scheduled in individual years. But it was simply a placeholder when we did the original PEPL spreadsheet because it was a brand new way to present the PEPL information that hadn't been done before.
So student board members, in a couple of minutes I'm going to ask if you have anything, and I apologize for not thinking more of you during tonight's meeting, but but when we get into especially discussions on some of these the high schools, you may have an interest. So be thinking about that. So I'm still I'm just concerned. I understand the reasoning, and the reasoning really is to try to save money in the expenditures by doing this work at the same time we're doing the other work. Is that correct?
Well, that and the fact that this work was already scheduled to be done at this time, it just had been in the spreadsheet entered as separate line items from the pool and auditorium, but in my estimation, had been expected to all be done together. They were separate line items, but they were in the same fiscal years as the pool and auditorium. So I guess the other thing to point out is that the secure entry, I believe that Central High will be the last building in the district to have the secure entry completed. The roof is one of those things that is going to have to be done in the very near future, regardless of whether it's done inside this existing project. And then the existing auditorium and pool areas, of course, once the new auditorium and pool are built, the previous plan had been to change those to other uses.
And then what about the ProStart?
The ProStart was a budget that was out there in 17-18 to provide a culinary kitchen for the ProStart program. And given all of the demands on resources, given all of the things we've heard you say about priorities, about other schools, about equity, we said that it could make sense to include it now, but what I was hearing was probably ought to leave it parked out there in 17-18 and consider it when we've had a thoughtful update of the entire plan.
But in this motion that's on the table right now, the ProStart, the 1.3 million, is part of this motion.
Is not included.
It's not included.
Oh, I thought it was the way that
No,
this.
no, sir.
To include now.
It remains where it was.
So why would the board be voting on something like that right now?
You're voting on the secure entry ADA improvements, the renovation of existing pool and auditorium, and on the green roof only.
Yeah, but it's part of that. Yeah, so, but it must be, say that again, what parts is it? It's the pool area?
It's the ADA and office secure entry, renovation of existing auditorium, renovation of existing pool, and replacement of a roof, the green roof.
78 and 1.4. So because the total budget amount in the motion is 4.2 million.
And that's the amount excluding the 1.3 million for the green roof.
So I'm trying to do the math real quick. So that would be That looks more like 3.1 million. I must be missing something. So that's 2. Okay. So the ProStart Culinary Kitchen in FCS classroom, FY 18-19 save $1.34 million. Even though it's in the narrative, it's not part of this motion. I just want to clarify.
It's in the narrative because at our work session, when we presented this information in December, it had been included in that discussion, and I wanted to show that it had been part of the discussion, and that our administration's recommendation was to leave it in its scheduled year in 18-19.
Okay, great. I apologize for my ignorance.
Any further questions?
No.
Director Snyder.
I guess what seems deceptive to me is if the roof was on the long-range plan by itself and has nothing to do with the pool and auditorium project, why it's actually lumped in under the pool and auditorium project. That is what seems odd to me.
Well, I have done that, I hope not at all to be deceptive in any way, but because we have the pool and auditorium project underway, because we have a construction manager on site, because we have this activity going on, and because we had these other projects already listed in your plan, it seemed the best, the most economical way to execute them would be to combine them because they're all done concurrently, and it would make most economic sense to do them all as part of the same construction management effort.
Answer your question, Director Snyder. Student school board members, any thoughts?
I mean, I don't know much about ProStart or I guess that's not part of this, but roofing or choir. But I mean, if these are things that are going to be done anyways, it makes sense to me to do them right now, just so that if it's cheaper, and also just so we'll only have construction going on once as opposed to drawn out over several years.
Thank you. Any other comments? Turn it over to the president.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other discussion on this item? Oh, Director Clough.
A question on the green roof. We call this a green roof. It's not a green roof the way we usually think of a green energy roof. Is that correct? It's a green roof because we got green stuff on it?
It's a green roof because there are some planter boxes out there, and it has got that nickname, I guess, from when it was originally constructed. There were pavers and planter boxes where people could go walk around if they chose to do so. And that proved operationally not to work out all that well. Then because of other changes made in the building since 1984, one of the accesses has been closed, and so now it cannot be occupied any longer by code because it would require 2 exits, and so for a variety of reasons it has not been much used as a plaza for people to go walk around, but it's been referred to as the green roof because it was built with these planter boxes where there could be some greenery.
Well, it was originally built at some extra expense. I mean, it's more costly than a regular roof, but there's no going back at this point. It is what it is. It needs to be maintained as such, I presume.
No, our plan is actually to remove the green roof and replace it with a conventional roof system. And to replace it again with a green roof would be even more costly than the estimate that we've given you.
Now, is there any comment from the central folks?
I mean, yeah, we can't go there anyways. I mean, you can kind of see it from some windows on the 6th floor, but I mean, nobody uses it for anything, so I don't think making a normal roof would change anything.
Well, I just agree with President Johansson's comment about it. The appearance of project creep. I mean, it seems like we have these discussions about Central and what we're adding and what we're doing, but clearly this is an efficiency in pulling these projects together at one time, and it makes sense to me. I appreciate your explanation of it, though, Mike.
Any other discussion, Director Snyder?
As far as efficiency goes on the roof, if we were to do this separately, what kind of cost difference would there be?
Well, there would probably be some, not significant, but some increased costs in general conditions. We'd have a separate contractor, a separate trailer, a separate operation underway. So there would be a little bit of duplication of some overhead expenses. So some increased, not momentous, and some increased coordination amongst the existing contractor and construction manager and the separate one if we took the roof on as a separate project.
Okay. My only concern is, without knowing where our long-range plan sits, the more, I mean, we have changed a lot over the last several months, moving stuff up, adding stuff in. I really don't have a clue where we're sitting with our long-range plan, and we keep kind of adding more things into this. I guess I'm just uncomfortable moving something up when we don't really know the whole scope of what our long-range plan and where that sits right now. You know, obviously the roof is close to its usable life. I certainly don't want to incur expenses to repair it temporarily. That seems like wasted money to me. I guess I'm just disappointed that we don't see it on its own merit rather than with putting it in with the pool and auditorium project, because I still don't see how it's tied in with that at all. And to me, it just seems deceitful, not from your standpoint, but it just seems, as President Johansson was saying, it's sort of like piggybacking it into this project, when really it's on its own merit, its own project, and it kind of seems unnecessary to me.
I can say only that it is at the end of its useful life. It does have active leaks. There are repair costs every year. It can be executed separately if the board thought that's best. It's not impossible to do that separately. Our recommendation is that all four be done, and whether they're done individually or as part of the same pool and auditorium project, we certainly can break them out.
Any additional discussion? I'd like to turn the chair over again. I apologize for this, but I want to talk a little bit, if I could.
President Johansson, any further discussion?
Yes, thank you. So I think Director Snyder may have kind of hit it on the head for me, is what it's called. And because here the motion is approved to amend the current central auditorium and pool project. And I was thinking, so we've got to renovate the existing auditorium area, which is, I think, kind of a separate project from the new auditorium. And I think the renovation of the existing pool area is similar, and the existing locker room, and the ADA improvements, and the green roof. And actually, I'm just thinking of recommending an amendment to what it's called, because if it were approval to do this work, it would make more sense to me than to call it part of the auditorium and pool project. And the other part of it, I think, is that it segregates out then this $4 million from the $21 million or $3 million or whatever you end up with on the pool and auditorium, because that has been a project from the get-go, right? Is
Yes.
the pool and auditorium. And for me, I think that's what did it, was because if we add this in, we're adding 4.2 million, then the pool and auditorium project just went up by 4.2 million.
We will account separately regardless of how you decide or if you decide to approve any additional work. The pool and auditorium budget, and we have a budget update in tonight's discussion, will be completely separate and discrete. You'll be able to see precisely what is pool and auditorium as opposed to what is anything else.
And I understand all that. I mean, the numbers are what they are. And I agree with the recommendation, except for the naming. So I'm going to make a recommendation that we amend the wording of the project to renovation projects and ADA improvements and a green roof for Central.
Could you repeat that?
I recommend that we change the wording of the project, and therefore the motion also would be approval of a project for renovations and secure entry and ADA improvements and the green roof.
Okay. So if I have this correct, President Johansson would like to amend the motion to reword the motion to renovation of projects including the security entry, ADA improvements, and the green roof. Is that correct?
And did you have renovations?
Renovations.
Yeah. Okay. It's close enough.
Is there a second?
Second.
Director Dickman has seconded that motion. So at this point, is there any discussion? Director Snyder.
I like that amendment. I think it's important. It may sound ticky-tack, but there's a perception issue going on. I mean, we voted down a $30 million project, but if we keep lumping these additions in and calling a pool and auditorium when they're really not, we're back to $30 million, and it's a huge perception problem, and that's where I had the problem. So I like this addition.
Is there any further discussion? Director Kremwoody.
I agree. I like the amendment because I know there has been some concern about continually adding to the Central Auditorium and Pool project. And with this amendment, I think that certainly sorts that out and keeps it clean. So I like it.
Any further discussion? Okay. I'll call for a vote on the amendment to amend the title to state that this motion is on the renovation of projects, the secure entry, ADA improvements, and the green roof. Right. Which will be read in when we go back to the original motion, I think. So, is there a motion to approve?
No,
The motion has been made and seconded. We'll take a vote.
It's on
Okay.
the amendment.
The amendment.
What you're
So the motion on the amendment has been made and seconded, and we will take the vote. Director Johansson.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Krumwoody.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes, sir.
And my vote is yes. The motion passes. I'll pass the baton back to the president.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any additional discussion on the amended proposal, which is to approve, the recommendation then would approve the projects to include adding the renovations of existing auditorium, pool area, PE locker rooms, and secure entry, and ADA improvements and replacement of the green roof for a total budget of $4 $1,228,813 and direct staff to solicit bids and bring bid awards for board consideration in order to complete the work by August 2016. Is there any additional discussion? Okay, great. We'll call for the vote. Director Crumwoody.
Yes.
Director Dickman.
Yes.
Director Snyder.
Yes.
Director Kluel.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Motion carries. We'll move into policy. Now, our policy committee chairman, Director DeFau, is not here tonight. The only policy that's up for approval is a, well, let me see here. I thought it was just one. So, so the policy regards animals on district property. Normally, the chairman of the committee would be presenting it, and as well, our lawyers have expressed a concern about a couple of words in here. I actually allowed it to be put onto the agenda because of some current issues regarding animals. However, I want to clarify to the board that the superintendent can address immediate concerns that have arisen in the district, and he does not need a policy. There isn't a sense of urgency that I thought existed. He can go ahead and address things in an appropriate manner, and we can address this policy on the 26th. And so what I'm going to say is that my intent is to take this off the agenda unless one of the board members has concern about that. Okay, if there's no concerns, we will not address this particular policy. Move on to discussion items, third grade retention. Mr. Scott?
I believe we have curriculum department headed this way.
Yep.
Julie?
Here we are. Tonight, as part of our presentation to the board on literacy, we're going to talk about the new Chapter 62 and third grade retention. So I have with me tonight Tara Parrish and Beth Evans, who are going to help me with this presentation. So the way this all begins is a new law that's been passed in the Iowa's code interpretation of that law. And it really is very specific in that it says retain in third grade any student who is not proficient in reading by the end of third grade on the universal screening assessment unless the student has a good cause exemption. And so the first thing that we need to understand is that this law says that students have to be proficient by the end of third grade or else they'll be retained. Now, the exceptions to that rule have to do with if the student completed an intensive summer reading program between third and fourth grade, if it's the student is a limited English proficient student that's been with us for less than 2 years, if the student has an IEP and the IEP indicates that participation in the required assessments is not appropriate, so that they would be taking the alternate assessment, or the student has demonstrated an acceptable level of performance on the alternate assessment. The other good cause exemptions are mastery through a portfolio demonstration, or that the student has previously been retained and has received intensive remediation in reading for at least 2 years. So while the law currently says that we will be retaining students, there are some exceptions. but we want to go into some detail with you and talk about what that really means for our district. So Tara's going to take over.
All right. So in looking at our spring 2014 benchmark scores, the students listed on this slide here are represented by these numbers here would need to receive intervention and then also be invited to our district summer school. So these are the students that fell in either below or well below category on the DIBELS benchmark assessment in the spring, which was 20% of our kindergarten students, 38% of first grade students, 34% of second grade students, and 36% of third grade students. So that's just under 5,000 students assessed and just under 1,700 students that would need to be invited to attend summer school. So that's an increase over what we had in previous years, over the number we invited in previous years. So summer school last year, this is how we identified which students were going to be part of the program and a little bit about what the program looked like. We started by inviting any kindergarten through third grade non-IEP student that was in the well below proficient category for DIBELS. Well below proficient, if a student scores in that category on DIBELS, that means they're 10 to 20% likely to meet future benchmarks. So those were the kids that we were targeting initially. Buildings did have some flexibility to add additional students. If they fell in that borderline just below category, they could still invite those students if they felt they would attend and benefit. So overall, we invited just over 1,000 students to our district literacy program in the summer, and we had 553 students enroll. Of those 553 students, 223 of them had attendance of 80% or better. Our attendance centers, although all students were invited, these buildings had a higher representation of students because it was at their building. That was Washington, Hayes, Monroe, Jefferson, Buchanan, JB, Wilson, and Eisenhower. Wilson and Eisenhower were our magnet sites where any student could attend, and then Washington, Hayes, Monroe, Jefferson, Buchanan, and JB were solely for their students first. If they could fill their site with Monroe students, then that's all that attended there. We had 32 teachers participating in summer school and used allowable growth in 21st century to fund it. The schedule last year was a 4-hour day, including breakfast and lunch outside those 4 hours. They had 2 solid hours of literacy instruction and then 2 hours of enrichment and activity. And then the program ran for 6 weeks for a total of 27 instructional days. They had 2 field experiences and 1 holiday in there, so that limited us to 27 days.
Okay, so Tara talked about what our summer school looked like this past summer. This, based on what the new law is saying, this is how it would impact our future summer school offerings. So we invited 1,100 students, over 1,100 students this past summer, but with the requirements in the law, any K2 student, and that would include students with IEPs, that would be below or well below, would be invited to attend summer school. We pretty much did that, ended up doing that this past year, but now any third grade student, including those with IEPs is the difference, we haven't had them in our summer school program, but any third grade student that has an IEP or does not have an IEP that scores well below or below would be required to attend summer school. So this is by 2017, this is what the law is telling us. So they would actually be required to attend summer school. If they met one of the good cause exemptions, then they would not have to attend summer school. But if they do not meet one of the good cause exemptions, they're required to attend summer school, or they will be retained. So just looking at our data that we had from the fall, we would have had about 400 third graders that this would have impacted, that would have had to attend summer school or be retained based on this information. So how will this impact our actual summer school programming? So we will have more students being invited to summer school, which means that we'll need additional teachers and paraeducators to help run the programs. That would be an increase in our professional development. We did have 2 professional development days, but as the number of teachers increases, we're going to need to offer more professional development, possibly in different locations. Increased number of sites. In order to serve the students, we're going to need more buildings opened up as sites. Tara listed the sites that we had this past summer. If we open additional sites, that's going to impact the cleaning schedule for all of these buildings. We know that that can be difficult to plan for the cleaning for it. It's also going to increase energy used, and I know that has been a focus to conserve energy in our district. Also, food and custodial staff. So our breakfast and lunch offerings will increase, and then the custodial staff that is there to actually, when the students are in the cafeteria, we need custodial staff there cleaning up. When students are in the buildings, we need custodial staff there. We would have to provide, we're assuming that we're going to have to provide transportation with this new law, and then we'll need more resources for the curriculum that will be delivered during the summer school hours. And then assessment tools to use within the program. We'll have to identify what those assessment tools are going to be and then determine the costs that are going to be associated with those tools. We do have tools within our district. We're just waiting to see what the requirements from the state on that are going to be. It might just be copying of materials or training of staff on those, but it could be additional licenses for assessments and things purchased. And then as the breakfast and lunch participation increases, there'll be a cost associated with that as well. And the guidance will be coming to us in the spring of 2015. So not too much longer. So that's what summer school will look like. Here are the things that we have in place right now in our district to help minimize the impact. So we have our core instruction, and you heard Wilson tonight presenting about what their core looks like. For the other buildings in our district, we have provided them with 95% group resources to supplement their core instruction. So in their Tier 1 instruction, K-5, we are using 95% group resources. This is our first full year of implementation. Then we also have the reading instruction coaches. They are supporting our core as well as that new 95% group piece. So they are all trained on our core resources, and they are helping to support those. They're also monitoring the building data, and that is driving what their PD focuses are. So if the data indicates that we need to focus on a certain area, the coaches come together at their meetings and they plan that professional development, and then they go out and they deliver it in the buildings. We have Tier 2 going on in all of our elementary buildings, so all of our students are getting a Tier 2 intervention, 30-minute minimum on that intervention time. It is in a smaller setting, so the group sizes based on the skill deficit, the smaller the group size for the students that are the farthest from grade level. And then it is focused on their skills that they need to reinforce. For our students who are at grade level, it's working towards continuing to accelerate them. There are Tier 2 plans, so we actually know what the focus is for those students. People, they're housed in the buildings. We also have access to them at the district level, so we can actually identify what our Tier 2 focus is. We have Tier 3 as well as Tier 2, so we have Tier 1 in our core, and then we have the Tier 2, which is that 30 minutes additional. For our students who are the farthest from grade level, they actually will receive a Tier 3 intervention as well. That is also a 30-minute minimum. The group size is getting even smaller. Those are group sizes ideally of 3 to 5 students working with one teacher. The intervention specialists in our district work with most of those students using the 95% group materials. There have been additional interventionists hired through building funds when they have larger numbers of students, but the most discrepant students are working with the most experienced individual with that. We also have GAP plans that are going in place, and I heard you guys mention GAP students a little bit earlier. So the GAP plans for those lowest 25% of students, based on Iowa assessments for our 3rd through 5th graders, they are not necessarily only focused on reading. They can be on academic behaviors or social behaviors, organization, motivation. They also have access to our reading intervention specialists who work with our Tier 3 students. So those are the individuals who generally fulfill the GAP plans as well.
So where are we going from here? Obviously, communication with all stakeholders is key. The students that are currently in 1st grade will be our first 3rd grade retention group, so it's important that we have clear communication. Early childhood is, of course, a key factor in helping students to get a jump start on early literacy, so to continue to strengthen our early childhood program. Monitor and provide feedback on our RTI structure. We've recently had a committee that's worked very hard at examining our current assessment system for which we're currently using is DIBELS, and what that means, and we'll be making a recommendation to the district student achievement team to change that over to the state-focused FAST assessment system, which does give us some very good structure for our RTI system. Obviously, ongoing professional development is key, that our letters training and our 95% group training for our teachers so that they are the very best that they can be at literacy instruction. We have a new curriculum adoption on the horizon, and so that will be taken seriously and considered as far as ensuring that we're using a research-based program. Family involvement and communication is, of course, important. The new Chapter 62 calls for parent contracts and addressing attendance issues, which are specifically part of the law, that parents, first of all, that parents are provided with a plan outlined in a contract that includes strategies that they can use at home to help their children, and that we address chronic early elementary absenteeism, because we know that students need to be in school in order to learn. So there's a lot to do. Like what we said, when this first was released, there were many things that we had to quickly put into place, which we've done, but the majority or the biggest part of this with the third grade retention doesn't come into play until 2017. However, there's a lot of work to be done before that date to make sure that we're prepared and that we're not going to have this overabundance of students that are going to be impacted by that. So we're open for any questions that you might have.
Olivia?
As for the Tier 2 and Tier 3, so for students who are in the Tier 3, would they have an hour extra of reading? Or would, yes, an hour? Okay. That's all I was curious about.
Is there any other discussion? Director Crumwoody.
I'm not sure where to even begin with all of that. This isn't the first time we've done this in this district. Back in the late 90s, the early years of 2000, we had a program in this district because our superintendent at that time was leading us in, I can't even remember the name of the book, but it was No Child Will Fail, and it all had to do with third grade retention. And so if students weren't proficient at that level, they were automatically retained, or we provided summer programming for those, intense summer programming, with a full-time reading specialist and a full-time teacher in a classroom with a ratio of 1 to 8.
And for the full-time reading the intensive instruction, that was one-on-one.
Okay. We had pretty good results. And I'm saying that because I know a little bit about it because I was the principal of that summer school program for a number of years. And I kept hearing the word, we invited children to the summer school program in the summer. We never invited them. We made it mandatory. If the parents said no, they were automatically retained. Or if they had some, and we had exemptions at that time, just like you shared tonight. If we do that type of programming, I hope we're not just inviting, we're making it very clear to parents that their child will be retained. And I think part of the reason we had such good results is because I wish you could have seen the parent involvement during those 6 weeks in that summer program. I mean, they were very, very involved and very concerned that their child was going to be retained. And they were there assisting, helping, making sure the kids were doing their homework when they got out of the program and so forth. So if we're going to do some type of summer programming, I hope it's not inviting, but making sure that parents in our community understand that children are going to need to be proficient because it's now state law. Otherwise, their children are going to be retained. So we need to certainly make sure that transportation was provided at that time.
Yes.
And that was a huge issue, because if we don't provide transportation, that's a huge issue for many, many families in this community. So certainly that's going to have to be a strong consideration, I think. Tonight, I'm just kind of getting some mixed messages, because we had the Wilson presentation, and the Wilson presentation had to do with reading mastery. And Julie, I think you mentioned that we're thinking now of a new adoption, reading adoption. Are we getting away with the whole idea of having consistency across our district with the reading program? And if we have this summer program, are we going to use reading mastery? Are we going to, the kiddos from Wilson School who aren't proficient, who are used to reading mastery, now are they going to be doing something different? And that's going to be more difficult for them. But if we use reading mastery, it's going to be probably better for the kids at Wilson, because they are exposed to that routine, because that is a very intense, I want to call it drill and practice.
Right.
Routine.
We honestly had not considered having a different curriculum for our summer school for Wilson yet, but that's something we will have to look at, because our 95% group material is an intensive intervention that we've put a lot of time and effort and training into, with Wilson being the exception to the rules. So that is something,
But don't we have other exceptions? Don't we have Madison using that program, and J.B. Young? Do they use reading mastery?
Madison uses reading mastery, but they also use 95% group.
Okay.
So they've opted to use that as well, because they saw gaps that they thought they could fill with 95% group.
So that's what I'm kind of getting at. If we have these different programs going on, and then we have kiddos who aren't cutting it, and then we're going to have to provide some consistency with their reading program. Otherwise, I don't know how we measure their progress in saying,
yes.
Because they're going to be exposed to a new curriculum.
And it's the whole idea behind summer school is that you give them intensive intervention, and reading mastery is certainly a program that can be considered for that.
I'm not a strong advocate of retention, but I think now that it is the law, we're going to have to make sure that our parents in this community clearly understand how important it is. And I know from my experience in the past, when we hired our teachers, we hired them like in April, we had the information by the end of the school year, by May, and every one of those parents were contacted, and it was made very clear that if you don't have your child here on day one, and the only way they can be absent from school is an illness or some serious accident, they are going to be retained. And I think if parents don't understand that, I, as a board member, I would be hugely disappointed that we only had 50% of our kids show up for that. That means
Right.
50% of those kids would be retained.
When we plan for summer school, and we're in the phases right now, I mean, we're already far down the road in implementing for next year, because we're going to have summer school at every site. And we still won't have transportation, but at least by offering it at every site, students are closer to that location. But at the same time, we do have a lot of people that work so that it's hard for them to get a student to our program this summer will be, there'll be 2 different programs, but a majority of our students will just have a 2-hour program, but it'll be intensive literacy instruction. But it's hard for parents to break away from work in order to get their students from the daycare or the sitter or whatever their home arrangement is to get them to summer school.
That's why transportation was so important.
Yes.
To make sure, because parents, especially working parents, and most of them are working, that they couldn't leave. And our program, I think was, it was we ran half-day programs, like 3 hours in the morning or 3 hours in the afternoon. We did not provide, and I noticed in the summer school program, 2 hours of recreational type. We didn't provide that. I mean, they were there to be taught reading, and that was it. We had breaks for them, but then we didn't have the other things. We did not provide breakfast. We did not provide lunch because we ran it like 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, and we worked around the lunch schedules. Custodian schedules, we worked around that. Custodians came in at different times to clean rather than doing it during the days, and that's the only way it worked to run that type of program.
Right. And our breakfast and lunch programs have worked out for the last few years very well because of the locations of our sites and because of the free breakfast and lunch programs at those sites. So it just worked nicely that the students could come, have breakfast, begin their program, and then the enrichment component was not taught by teachers, but by
Iowa State Extension.
Yeah, Iowa State Extension and some people like that, so that we were able to provide a pretty well-rounded program for the kids, and plus field trips on some Fridays.
And so if you've had these programs in the past, did you also have to hire administrators to be there? How did you handle all that in case of emergencies? I know that we had a nurse because we had a lot of students who had health kinds of issues.
And we still have nurse.
We have people who are trained, so
Okay.
I don't think we actually they had to go through certain trainings to be able to be the one who could administer medicines or be on call for it.
There were medications I know that we had to give, but we also had to have an administrator in case there was.
We have a coordinator.
A coordinator,
So it's not
okay.
it's not actually a principal,
Okay.
but we have had site coordinators.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have our work cut out for us.
You do.
Uh-huh.
Good luck.
Any
Maybe you
additional?
can come back,
Oh.
Ed.
No.
Excuse me, Director Snyder.
That is, to say the least, alarming. 1 out of 3 of our K through 3 kids is in need of this program, and of those, less than 5% attended with 80% attendance. I guess my first question, Director Crumweedy kind of alluded to, define invited for me. I mean, walk me through how that process works.
Well, do you want to explain it?
You want to do the invitations? Yep.
We couldn't require that students attended, so invited was the term that we used. So last year, we invited all of the students. They all got a postcard from the district, and we asked building principals to gather them in the library or cafeteria and kind of sell the program a little bit so that when they got home and saw that the postcard was there with their parents, they'd be excited to come. And we held two or three
kickoff events.
Kickoff events at the Putnam where they could come and hear about the program and visit the Putnam and then see a movie together. And we could really give the information to the parents to sell the program to the parents and how beneficial it would be to their students. But without being able to require that they attend, attendance has always been our issue. And we've continued to look for ways to improve the attendance now we have the requirement to go along with it, so it will be easier, especially when we talk to parents coming up in the next month or two. We'll have our winter DIBELS data, so we'll be able to talk to parents using that fresh data point to let them know, here's where your child is right now. If they continue on this path, by the time they hit third grade, retention will be an option for them if they don't choose to attend the summer school program.
How were the attendance centers decided upon? I mean, how did you decide which schools to use?
We started with 21st century, the schools that had 21st century grant money,
Okay.
because we were able to fund more kids that way, and then selected locations on the west end and east end so that we could pull more students from magnet sites.
Okay. Because I saw there's kind of a, like in the northwest side, there's nothing at Truman, nothing at Fillmore, nothing at Harrison. It's kind of a big gap, but I guess you've got Buchanan up in there.
Mm-hmm. And we did, although Buchanan was considered a pure site, we did send a lot of Fillmore students to Buchanan, and then just did the braided funding there so that the 21st century paid for Buchanan, and then allowable growth would pay for the Fillmore students. So we left that option open for parents, and even if, if they work in a different area, so they needed to take, they're a Monroe student, but they work or have daycare or go to their aunt's near Eisenhower, we made those arrangements for families as well.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that as a struggle. If we don't provide the transportation, getting them there is...
We obviously, at the sites where it was the students' homeschool, we had better attendance at those sites, which is why this year we're going to offer a shorter program so we don't need as many teachers, but can offer it at every site. So all buildings will have a 2-hour, is the plan, summer school program this year. The 21st century grant sites have more money, so they'll continue to run the 4-hour program. So we're hoping that there'll be smaller sites, but hopefully walking or daycare is nearby so we can get more kids.
I hope so too, because if we can't get them there, we can't help them.
Additional discussion. Director Dickman.
Well, I certainly hope that you're able to communicate effectively to them, and that will kind of light a fire and say, oh, that will strike a chord that they'll say, okay, I really do need to attend. Can you talk a little bit more about the funding stream? I'm guessing that guidance you were talking about doesn't come with dollar signs, and that's, I don't know about the rest of the board, but if I could assist in some way to help fund so we could have 4 hours of attendance at every school, I think that's would be admirable.
At this time, we don't know what funding is going to come with the summer school guidance. So we're planning this summer, kind of just making some assumptions of things that we think are going to be coming up in that guidance just to get a step ahead, but we're not sure what funding will be attached to that.
Okay, so will there be any funding for the summer school that will be coming out of the general fund?
Do you know?
Marcia?
The current funding was partially paid for through allowable growth, and we have done some trading of services, and I think that's now coming out of the general fund.
Okay.
But the 21st century is separate.
Okay. Obviously, we want to educate our students, and these are the students who most need help. I know that we are facing belt tightening, and that will be more difficult when we're trying to perform more services.
Anybody else? Director Kluhl.
Just curious when the transfer from DIBELS to FAST takes place. When is that going to be, DIBELS going to be phased out?
Okay, right now in kindergarten, because DIBELS did not qualify as a state-approved benchmark assessment, we are going to be transitioning to FAST for kindergarten coming up
In 2 weeks.
in 2 weeks.
Week and a half.
Lots of training going on, lots of...
Done 2 days of training.
Then we're taking the recommendation to the DSAT later this week that the committee is recommending that we move to FAST, and so then that would take place for next year. They're very similar assessments. They give us similar types of information. One of the things that happens with FAST is that it's got a structure in place for collecting that data and reporting directly to the state. And then it also has an RTI system built into that data collection system so that we'll be able to monitor those progress of those students.
So like GOLD, the online aspect of it
Yes.
is one of the big
Mhm.
differences.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Director Crumwoody.
I want to go back to the term inviting. And really, this is for Director Snyder's a little background information. We didn't invite them because we had a school board policy that clearly stated what I was talking about. And we no longer have that policy. In, I don't know what year it was, but that policy was changed back probably about 9 years ago. And so it was a policy that made it very clear that those children would be retained if they weren't proficient. And so that was the teeth in the whole program. Now we have the law, so I don't know if we need the policy, but I think perhaps this is something that the policy committee might want to discuss, because maybe we do need to go back and take a look at that policy that we used to have.
Any additional discussion? Anybody? Wow. When Director Crumwoody said, I don't know where to begin, that's what I felt. And we've known this was coming for some time. The law that you indicate there on your first slide, I think, and the second slide, if I remember right, was good cause exemptions. Are the good cause exemptions part of the law, or were they established by the district?
No. This is everything that we have said is part of the law. And the guidance on this law came out in August of 2014. So while we may have in the district heard, glimmers or something about something coming down the pike, this was pretty quick, and we have quickly looked at this to make sure that we're in compliance with what had to be done right away.
Do you think that this came from the legislature or from the department?
Legislature?
They wouldn't have... How could they have any understanding of how to create these good cause exemptions? I'm thinking that these good cause exemptions, which I don't actually agree with, but I'm wondering how in the world could a legislator come up with that?
I honestly could not tell you how.
Okay.
I couldn't.
All right. So, so when they say that a student that's a limited English proficient student with less than 2 years of instruction in an ESL program is a good cause exemption, so that student could be less than proficient, right?
Yes.
And we're going to give them a pass because they don't know how to speak English, right? And so we're going to go ahead and not retain a student like that.
They wouldn't be required.
Huh?
They wouldn't be required.
They aren't required. And and then in here I have to ask, you use the term below and well below frequently. And then as you were expressing that, I thought, well, what is the difference if the result is the same? So is there is there a difference between below and well below in the way that you've used those words?
There's the difference between below and well below is the likelihood that they'll hit the next benchmark. So you're well below, they have a lower likelihood of hitting the next benchmark. But in the state's eyes, you're either red or green. So our below and well below isn't really going to matter. Those are Dibbles terms, which is what we use. But when we move to looking at how the state views the students, they view them as red or green.
Proficient or not proficient.
Yep.
Have you run any models on what this would look like math models, anticipating when we look at 30-some% of the kids can't read, right?
Yep.
And now all of a sudden we're going to retain some percent of them, whatever it is. And I view the third grade growing like that all of a sudden. I mean, and the things that you described, Beth, you went through a litany of, it's going to cost this and this and this and this. And I'm thinking, I don't know how much all that is. And I know you don't have the guidance, but it strikes me that we're probably talking at least in excess of $1 million. Okay? And it strikes me also that this is probably an unfunded mandate, even though you expect guidance, that the district is going to have to absorb into its general budget.
I honestly, I don't think that we can make that statement, because every district in the state is in the same boat. And so I think that while this is a very worthy cause, I think that the state saying that the district has to absorb this would be asking a lot of districts at this time. So not that it couldn't happen, but I guess I'm optimistic.
You're more optimistic than I am about our legislature. A couple other things. So the 2 hour of literature and the 2 hour of enrichment, can you just give me real quick, I mean, when does the day start?
That day, so we had the 2 hours of enrichment so that we could serve more students. So that was there so that we could flip-flop students. So the day began at 8 o'clock for students, and then one group of students would have from 8 to 10 in the intensive literacy block. And then from 10, it was actually 10 to about 11:45, they would go to the enrichment block, and the kids who started their day in enrichment would now go to the literacy block.
Okay, I gotcha. So as I thought through that, and then I thought, in addition, we're providing breakfast and lunch. So does the breakfast and lunch encroach on any of the literature time, or does it only encroach on the enrichment time?
It was just on the enrichment time, because students who had the enrichment first, that first block would be able to go to the lunchtime before, like earlier. So they still only really had about an hour or an hour and 45 minutes. And then they would get to so when we flipped, they grabbed their lunch basically and left at the end of the day.
But wouldn't all kids have breakfast in this?
And that was from 7:30? 7:30 to 8.
Okay, so that's before the 4 hours.
That was before the program, yep.
The AEA district, have they given you any guidance or advice or anything with respect to what's going on here in our district?
In regards to the summer school piece?
Summer school or addressing the law or anything?
We actually have a staff member here in Davenport that's on the team, so Shari, part of our special ed team, she's actually part of the state team that has been working on the guidance. So we do have frequent reports from her, and I know she does give that information to the AEA as well. So we kind of have somebody at least with their ear to what's going on. But we did work with the AEA recently for FAST to start focusing on our FAST assessment piece.
I know sometimes our discussions get long, and this one scares me. And the numbers, the statistics that you've presented, the ideas in terms of cost, I mean, and you mentioned we're going to add paras and teachers and transportation and all of these things that I wish I could make a bet on whether the legislature is going to fund it all. But I guess I can't. I think we'll be looking forward to more of your presentation next spring when you get all that guidance.
And I'd love to share, once we get the winter benchmark data, I would love to share that with you just to see if our projections are going to change based on what we've put in place, to see if we see any changes in the data. So we'll have that in the next month.
I did want to go back to the law and the actual rules and regs that came out of that law. So when you look at the things like ESL and that, those I believe, and now I'm not 100% sure, but I think that came out in the code, the interpretation of the law. So while the law is not as specific, then the Iowa Department of Education took that and made what it means. So I think that's where that ESL component came from.
Okay, thank you. Director Snyder.
Yeah, just one minor clarification. Director Crumweedy had said 1 out of 3 students can't read. That's actually, they're not reading at grade level. It doesn't mean they can't read at all. So I didn't want, I saw some jaws drop out there, and I guess I wanted to clarify. And this is also laws that are established that also said that this country would have 100% of their students at or above grade level by 2014, and we all know how viable that is. Not that I'm trying to deaden the blow or make it seem not as bad as it really is, but there's a lot more that falls into it. And I would be curious as to where the rest of the state is at, in particular other urban districts. And I don't know how we would gather that information, but I would be curious because I know we're not alone in this fight. We are absolutely not the only district out there with 1 out of 3 K through 3s that
Right. While
attention.
we currently don't have access to their benchmark data, you can just, by looking at Iowa assessment data and seeing how many students are not proficient, they're not exactly the exact same test, but they have a lot of kids that are not proficient too in the urban districts.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your work.
So, I wanted to clarify because the word proficient means different things depending on the context. Proficient here, with respect to the way that the law is written, is that proficient the same definition as No Child Left Behind, or what exactly does proficient mean? Because I've never interpreted that as meaning reading at grade level.
I would.
In this case, they're reading at or above grade level.
So that's what the law means here.
Yes.
Based on the universal screener, they're at or above grade level.
Okay. And it wasn't Director Crumweedy, it was me that made that remark. Oh.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Did I say Crumweedy?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, is there any additional discussion? Director Crumweedy.
I just, a couple of things. First of all, Director Johansson mentioned the Area Education Agency. I think there needs to be conversation. I think there's support there that we may think about utilizing, which I feel as a board member and as a board member of the AEA, we underutilize. So I think there needs to be conversation with the reading folks at the AEA. What's going on in the AEA? How can they support us with this? Because it's, the 22 school districts, we're not alone in this. I mean, it's the entire AEA. So I think there needs to be more conversation, and I would hope that our administration might initiate that conversation.
Absolutely.
There's 2 of us on that board, and we may also share some comments about that because this is a huge concern. I would also hope that the administration would give us updates throughout this year as to what's going on, what's the data telling us, approximately how many kids are we going to have, what's our communication plan to parents, where we're at. As a board member, I'd like to know that throughout the year so we kind of have an idea of what's going on with this.
Absolutely.
Okay, Thanks for your work.
Any additional discussion? I had one other comment, and I apologize again for dragging this out. One of my comments, I asked about the reality. I was thinking also about the policy that used to exist and the general sense of where the board was, where the community was at that time. And when I talk about reality, I'm thinking with the words that you've used and with the good cause exemption, it strikes me that the reality is that even though this many students could be retained, is it the district's or yours? I don't know where this actually falls. Is there a way to not retain them? If we wanted to move them forward, or is this really rigid? Is it?
Is
the reality is we're going to actually retain kids,
unless they attend summer school.
and you're going to have some guidance. It isn't going to be 10% of the summer school,
I'm going to guess no.
Right. No.
but we don't know what that number is, right?
Correct. A couple months, and we should hopefully know what that means by attend summer school.
There's a good idea. Okay, any other discussion? All right, thanks a lot. Great presentation. Tell you what, we've been at it for over 2 hours. We have one additional discussion item that I believe is probably going to take more than 5 minutes. And so I'm going to call a 5-minute recess, and then we will reconvene, and we'll have our last discussion item on long-range facility planning. Okay, Director Snyder says he'd like to have this meeting done by 9 o'clock. Okay, Mr. Scott, long-range facility planning, discussion item.
Mr. Maloney, are you ready to start in this conversation?
Certainly. There are multiple discussions that we all and you have had over the past several months about the current long-range facility plan, the sequence of projects currently scheduled, the allocations of funds currently scheduled, and we have been, your staff, actively involved in trying to pull together information to update the existing spreadsheet and so forth. And as I explained in the materials that we've provided, it seems that in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the district did a pretty comprehensive update every 3, 4, 5 years, and with some outside help, and published a document, a comprehensive plan that talked about your ed specs, that talked about your goals and priorities. And then we currently have basically this spreadsheet that is most of the content of the plan. In my office, there are a number of other documents, and there has been a number of other pieces of work put together. But we wanted to have a discussion item where you could talk some about how you would like your staff to proceed over the coming months. We recognize, as I mentioned in the materials, provided some gaps in the information that we currently have. We've engaged a firm to help us assess roofs across the district so we would understand them, because as I mentioned, it can be $1 million plus investment in a single building annually. So we're trying to get a really good understanding of roofs. We've had discussions internally amongst your instructional staff, Mr. Scott, Mr. Schneiden, Ms. Tangen, Mr. Sloat and I and others about what should our ed specs be? What do libraries look like in the future? What do computer labs look like in the future in light of the one-on-one initiative and so forth? And all of these things are part of an ongoing discussion about what the ed specs ought to be. We know we need to do some work on demographics and understand what the future enrollments will be and enrollment patterns school to school. We can do all of this work with your staff over some period of time. In the past, we've seen, as recently as 2002, you engaged some outside architecture and planning firms to help do a comprehensive update. The staff did the preponderance of the work, it appears, in 2008 on a comprehensive plan update. And in doing the work now, the discussion is to ask, would you like your staff to simply update the spreadsheet that we have based on that we know today, bring that back to you? Would you like to take more time and do a more deliberate and thoughtful process and engage more of the staff, perhaps engage some of the community in some very structured ways in order to come up with a comprehensive update of current conditions, of projected operating, maintenance, and capital costs by building, of projected enrollments, and our ed specs, our requirements for the future, in order to inform some of the decisions that you know you will be making in the near term. And so we've done some work to show what that might look like to complete a comprehensive effort with some outside help by August, recognizing that some board members may choose not to return, and there may be some desire to take advantage of the institutional knowledge that exists and make some long-range decisions prior to the end of August. And so we wanted to have some of your conversation about how you think it would be best for us to proceed with the comprehensive long-range planning process.
Is that it?
I could go on if you like.
No, you said plenty. Thank you very much. So, but you're ready for the discussion to begin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Comments, thoughts, discussion on this vast area of discussion by the board. Anybody? Director Dickman.
Well, I'll kick us off. All right. So I was reading over the document that you sent us, and the costs seem reasonable. I'd rather have us have a good plan than be fumbling our way through the process. I've expressed interest, and I think a few other board members have expressed interest in estimating some return on investments for green energy and things like that. Is that something that would be part of this plan or go into the making of this plan?
Well, yes. In part of what we would do is project the long-range operating and capital costs at each campus, knowing what we know about the different systems in place and so forth. And you would be able to see, for example, what is the difference in the long-term operating cost of those buildings that have geothermal systems as opposed to those who don't, and that will inform decisions about million-dollar investments into mechanical upgrades at buildings and things like that. We would expect that as part of the capital costs going forward, that there would be an element about sustainability and about sustainable systems and how those would play into the future. That would be one element of projected future capital costs.
Okay. And then just another note, I do support the idea of doing a comprehensive revisioning of the plan. I think that some of the numbers are out of date, and maybe some of the ideas are a little out of date, and I think this is a good time to make the big to do a big comprehensive update.
Director Snyder.
I believe that's correct, that we have the secure entry projects done at all the schools except Central.
document in regards to the long-range facility plan. At the end, it talks about a committee and appointing a committee, and anyway, it addresses that there's a line in there that says board appoints a committee starting Monday, 1/19/15.
We started off with just a tentative schedule of if we engaged more of our staff and perhaps some interested members of the community, and that would be, the structure of that would be something you all would decide, and we just tried to develop what would a schedule look like if we got started in January with the idea that this work needs to be completed for discussion at your August meeting, at your August COW, in order for you to have the opportunity to make any decisions in August should you choose to do so.
Anything else, Director Snyder? Director Crumwoody.
I think it was President Johansson who has, and correct me if I'm wrong, expressed some concerns about how we generate the information for the long-range facility plan. That, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, the way it kind of works is that you go out and meet with the building administrator, and the building administrator says, well, this is kind of the way we look here, and this is really what we need to have done. And I'm speaking from past experience again. It's like, well, yeah, I'd kind of like to have that. And all of a sudden it becomes part of the plan. And I've always wondered why, as Director Johansson has said, you know, there should be, and I know there are some, but it seems to me there should be more emphasis on district-wide kinds of issues. And you know, I'm going to just pull one out again that we talked about tonight, and that's preschool. To me, I think that's a district-wide issue. We have a poverty committee, we have a preschool committee, and we hear on both of those committees that we're not serving our 4-year-olds adequately in this community, that there are a lot of kiddos out there that aren't making it to preschool. We have our preschool centers, but they're not getting there because of transportation. And so Fillmore was a great example of, well, here's an opportunity while the building project's going on that we could include somehow a preschool there. And if you look at our district and the schools that have perhaps the greatest need for preschool centers, we don't even have them. And so I think there needs to be, and I don't know how we want to go about it, but there needs to be something that the district says, well, here's our priority. Our priority is, you know, one of our priorities is poverty. One of the issues with poverty has to do with early childhood education. And how do we deal with that? Well, we have more preschool opportunities for our children, and hopefully that'll have an impact, so we won't have to retain all these kids in 3rd grade. So we need to look at these district-wide things, I think, more than just building things. And I think we do that somewhat, but I think there needs to be more emphasis. I'm not, you know, I like community input, but I'm not crazy about going out to the community and say, well, what do you think we ought to do? Well, I remember one time we were going to build a high school down on the river. Good thing we didn't. But I think we have the expertise right here in this district. We have great administration and teachers. I think we could pull together and say, these are district-wide needs that we have in this district. So somehow that's what I want to happen with this plan. I don't think we throw out the plan that we have, because there's, again, there's commitments that we've made as a board to complete in this district. I think we need to follow through with those commitments.
Director Kluhl.
Same line of thought I had with Ken, but a different way of thinking about it, perhaps. So I feel obligated to say it because something new might come up that you didn't mention in your little discourse. This whole local option sales tax thing started out called LOST. It was lost money. I was kind of curious the name that they gave to that, but it was started out, as I've listened to the boards past, where it was a very populist movement to go out and talk with the public about, okay, these are the funds that we're going to be receiving here. What shall we do? And I think it worked out very well for a while, but I think over time it has been patched, and we've gone to the schools and we've asked administrators, what do you want? And the last concerted effort, I think, that we had as a board was when we decided that we wanted to proceed with geothermal in our schools. And I think we're just about there in terms, I mean, we've done the security control entrances. I think we're about there with our geothermal programs as well. Just about the time, ironically, that the state wants to start deciding when we're going to start school. It's a sad irony. But I think it's time, like Director Dickman mentioned, that we get a consultant in to help us with these issues, pull it together. As Director Crumwoody mentioned, the issue of how this takes place. Do you just go out to the public again like we did in the past? Well, I think times have changed. We're more mature. This is a more mature program at this point, and I think it requires that we be a little more intentional about how we go about it. But I do think the board needs to work in concert with a consultant somehow. We need to have some discussions. And I was going to mention the preschool program. There's some thought there in terms of what are we going to do? Are preschools that important in our local buildings that we need to start considering that in our plan? Perhaps so. But I think that's a discussion that the board needs to have. I think after the board has their discussion, they decide on what the priorities are, where we want to lead the district. And at that time, I think it would be appropriate to go back out to the public and say, look, here's where we plan to move forward. This is what your board has decided we need to move forward in the 21st century. Let's hear what you have to say and respond to that. But I think just to go out to the public in general would be inappropriate. So I support hiring a professional consultant, further board discussion, and ultimately public involvement in reviewing the long-term plan.
Any additional discussion? I've got a few comments then. Excuse me. Mr. Maloney brought up the idea that there's a sense of urgency to us having this discussion as well because of the change in the board makeup that's going to occur next fall. And and if this board is going to make its mark, it should have those conversations that you have alluded to shortly and develop that guidance for the administration. And I agree completely. As I thought about the way that our long-range planning was developed and how it exists, and I listened and thought about, and Director Crumwoody had addressed the difference between district needs versus building needs. And to me, that's similar to a strategic versus short-term. So as a district, we can say, yeah, preschool. We can say broadband. We can say a lot of different things that would affect the way that we do things as a district. When we go to a school or a building and we say, principal, what do you want? And the principal expresses their best intentions. But then to me, it's a single person's perspective, and and it may not be representative of what's best for the district and what's best for all of our students. And I think the board has generally been moving in this, well, they've always had an interest in early childhood. Legislatively, I don't know if it's been every year that's been one of the legislative priorities. The preschool issue, I think that if this district makes that kind of decision that it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. I do support the idea of getting a consultant involved, and I know you and I have had discussions about consultants and making sure that they have the right, not boundaries, I forget exactly how you described it, but when the consultants went out to look to see what we needed at Central for a pool and auditorium, they weren't constrained by the board or by you. They kind of went and said, hey, what do you want, right? And I think that's something we do have to be careful of. There was something else in your opening remarks were huge, and I'm going, it's a lot of work. Holy cow. All of the things that you're talking about, and even just thinking about all this, thinking about district needs and building needs and financing and so the one difference, I guess, that I would express is that I don't have the same sense that we have to comply with what's already on the long-range plan. If we, for instance, say that we're going to fix a bathroom in one of the schools, and when we look at these priorities, I think there are going to be competing priorities. And it may be that, however, and I think it's mostly administration or committee or whatever, says, well, maybe an early childhood modification for $475,000 is more important, and maybe we take something off the list. And so I'd like to give that kind of freedom, I think, to the board or committee or whatever it is that does that work. And the only last thing, so you talk about identifying and recruiting citizens and staff participants, and then towards the end, you did talk about that committee, and you say board appoints the committee. Is your your thinking that would be a board committee or an administration committee?
My own thinking is could be either. Going to be informed by your discussion tonight. If you chose to say we want it to be a board-appointed committee and make a report to the board with that charge, that's one way it's done. If you said to the staff, go and get some good folks in the room and work on this and bring us some ideas and help us work on it, we could do it that way. I and in my conversations with Dr. Tate and Ms. Tangen and the others, we envisioned that there would be a committee, it would be some staff, it would be some community folks who've maybe been involved and supported this kind of work before, whether it's board appointed or whether it's superintendent appointed, I don't think is really essential one way or the other. And then we thought that group would help design a process and figure out how to go out and do some really well-structured engagement with the community that would put some bounds on what they're asked to do and inform the community about what our constraints are, what the board's priorities are, and get some input, but do that in a very structured way, not a blue sky, we want this and we want that, because there are serious limitations on our resources, and in the current plan we have $110 million or so in the next 5 years, and that's a seriously constrained budget given the needs that we have. Hard to imagine.
So there's also a sense of urgency for a whole lot of reasons to get this whole process moving. And you've expressed in your tentative timeline, that we would have this committee appointed by next Monday. I don't know if the board wants to comment on who makes up, not who makes up, but comment on that committee, whether it should be a board committee or an administration committee. Director Klohl?
I'll start. For me, I mean, it's clearly an operational committee. I would like to see it led by administration, informed by the board.
Okay. Anybody else? Director Snyder?
I completely agree. Administration knows what they need better than we do.
Anybody else?
I would definitely agree.
Okay. Director Dickman?
Also agree.
Well, it looks like you got some consensus there. And I think the board, yeah, they would want to have some understanding and some guidance, but you've got the answer, and whatever you and the leadership team come up with, that's the way it'll go. Is there anything else? Like I say, you asked for a lot in your opening remarks. Do you have a sense of where the board is? Do you have enough information?
I think we have enough information today, and I think we'll be back to you regularly during this process to get your guidance. There'll be some of your individual input. There'll be some committee of the whole discussion undoubtedly during this process, and there will be some regular reports to you about how we're structuring the work, who we've appointed to the committee, what the schedule might be, and so forth.
Any other comments from the board? Yeah, I just want to say that I really concur with sense of urgency for a whole lot of reasons. I think that the committee should be appointed as soon as possible, and it should be trying to get its work done. I think you're supposed to make a presentation on the long-range plan in March also, aren't you?
I was hoping to update the current plan in February or March. I'm trying to get that as soon as possible. And what I will suggest to you is that in addition to the need for a comprehensive long-term plan, the work for 15-16 is already underway. The work for 16-17, there may be some things that we will ask you to decide for 16-17 this spring, and that will be before the big plan is done, but I think it will probably make sense. So we will be back with an update in February, March of that spreadsheet. And that will, I think, coincide with all of the things we've been hearing from you, and not be inconsistent with the bigger effort.
So, and I just want to make sure that we, the board, and we, the administration, that we push so hard, because somehow I'd like to have this done even before August. I'd like to, if it were possible, to have a general agreement by June or July that this is the long-range plan. I think that'd be fantastic. Any other Mr. Scott?
I just want to clarify, are we utilizing the outside group then to come in? I've heard some different discussions.
So in the letter that we received from Mr. Maloney, he recommends a consultant for, I think it was around $100,000 or something.
Between 80 and 100,000,
Right.
we think this would cost.
And I think that I heard board members comment on it, but maybe we weren't clear. Can the board members just clarify their position on that particular issue? It's not really a voting thing, and I'm not sure where the money would come from, but I figure you've got it.
There were funds for long-range planning in a line item called long-range planning in the spreadsheet that you received in August.
Okay.
75,000 this year, 75,000 next year.
All right. Okay. But I'd like the board members to clarify a position on the administration hiring a consultant for this purpose of building that long-range plan. Director Dickman?
Affirmative.
Okay. Director Crumwitty?
Yes.
Director Klohl?
Appropriate.
Director Snyder?
Yes, sir.
Yep, and my position is yes as well. So you have good consensus there. Is there anything else that you need from us?
Not this evening. Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else from the board members? Okay, very good. Thank you for the presentation. We'll move on to administrative reports.
Don't have any administrative reports. I would just say that it is prime time for the show choir season. So if you do have opportunities to see any of our schools and the tremendous product that they put out, I would say get out there as many of the schools as you're able to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any board reports or requests? Director Crumwitty.
Yes, I did not fill out a request, but I brought it up, and I noticed, President Johansson, that you wrote it down. Concerning the board policy concerning the third grade retention, is that a request that I need to fill out, or is that a conversation that you will have with the policy committee?
Well, it depends on what your intent is. Would you like the board to discuss it, in which case it should be an agenda item request, or just ask the policy committee to consider it?
I think the board should discuss it.
Okay, so it would be
before it goes
most
to the policy
appropriate
committee.
to go ahead and fill out the request. We'll assume that you're going to fill one out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are requesting that there be an agenda item to discuss third grade retention policy.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Okay. The second thing, and I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of the passing of David Lanigan. David Lanigan was a longtime educator in the Davenport School District. David passed away at the end of December, and I would, on behalf of the board, like to express the condolences of the board to his family, his wife, Mary Jane, and his sons and daughter. And for those of you who aren't really aware of David Lanigan, he was very instrumental in this district in the area of special education. He was the first principal at the old Fairmont School, which was down near River Drive. Fairmont School was the very first school that dealt with children with learning disabilities. David was a pioneer in the field of learning disabilities before it was even a category in the state of Iowa. And the school itself was not ran by Davenport, it was ran by the county at that time. And after new legislation came through and the area education agencies were formed and so forth, Fairmont School closed. And those children, many of them, ended up in the Davenport schools. And that's when we first began our learning disability resource rooms and special classes in the school district. But it was David Lanigan who really led the way in that area. And after he left Fairmont School, he loved that area so much that he left administration and went back into teaching learning disabilities and taught in the learning disabilities field and at Garfield School for several years as a learning disability teacher. So I just wanted to express our sympathy to the Lanigan family, and we certainly appreciate everything that David did for our school district in that area of learning disabilities for several years in this community.
Thank you. Any other board reports or requests? Director Kluhl.
A report on the passing of another Davenport Community School District member of our community, Helen Hortense West, whose nickname was Tenty, 95 years old, from Davenport, passed away on December 22nd of 2014. After graduating from Simpson College, Tenty taught high school English. She was a very active volunteer in the community, serving on numerous committees and organizations. She was delegate to the National PTA, president and 35-year board member of the Humane Society of Iowa, and was named University of Iowa Mother of the Year in 1975. Tenty was the first woman on the Davenport School Board. So our appreciation to the family for the life of Helen and Tenty, the time she spent with us, and our condolences to the family in her passing.
Thank you. Any additional reports or requests? I've got one request from board member Johansson dated 1/12/2014, an agenda item to discuss board protocol. If there are no other reports or requests, I will entertain.
Want me to take
Excuse
the
me?
chair for this? Want me to take the chair for this?
No.
You just want to go ahead? Go ahead. All right, go ahead.
For what? For the adjournment?
Adjournment, yeah.
I think we had enough of that tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.